Narayana Samarambam Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodha Vidiyate. In the last video I explained this portion of the text, but I forgot to read it, so we'll start here to do a little bit of review. Maya is composed of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. From these three qualities evolve the five elements in their subtle, non-physical forms. In turn, from these subtle elements, the subtle body develops. When the five elements divide and recombine, the gross forms of the elements are created. From the gross elements, the gross body develops. Consequently, there is an identity between the individual and the entire universe. They are both composed of the five elements, or matter, and are therefore essentially non-different. Now, why is it important to have an identity between the individual and the entire universe? Because we are in the section of the text that is slowly taking these apparent parts of duality and showing them to be non-different and non-separate in order to facilitate the knowledge or vision of non-duality. Because we can't have that knowledge if we continue to have a belief, an ignorant belief in the separation of different things between self, not self, or between the, so we can't have that division. We're starting with the parts of the not self and showing how they are essentially non-different. The text is dividing them up into the individual, the world or the creation, and then also the creator. This is what the section I just read was talking about. It's what we discussed in the last video. The point being that Maya is unmanifest. First, it manifests the subtle forms of the five elements, which are matter in its non-physical form. You could think of it as energy. Okay? Matter and energy being the same thing, essentially, one is manifest and one is unmanifest. So that means that Maya is matter. It makes the effects of the subtle elements, which are also matter. Those subtle elements create the subtle world. Okay? They create the subtle body. They create your mind and all the functions of your mind and subtle body. Those subtle elements divide and recombine and become the gross elements. They create your gross body and they create the entire gross world. The subtle and the gross are completely non-different as the five elements. The five elements is really just a way of talking about matter. So when you see that the individual person, the mind and the body, are composed of nothing other than matter or the five elements, and the world around the person is composed of nothing but the five elements or matter, you can see that the person and the world, the creation, is non-separate from one another and non-different. They may appear to be different based on the name and the form, the different shapes, the different colors, the different attributes, but essentially they are not different because they are just matter. So Maya is matter. All of its effects are matter. So you can reconcile all of those things together. Now, I'll make a point here before we go and talk about the creator of the creation, is that if you don't have a doubt about the Creator, you can just skip this step and move on. Really. Because not everybody believes that there's a Creator. Not everybody thinks that there's a Creator. And although Vedanta talks about the Creator, just like it's not concerned with proving the actuality of creation, it's not concerned with proving the actuality of how Maya becomes the manifest objects. Vedanta is not concerned with proving the actuality of a creator. If you just see things as yourself, the self, consciousness, and everything else as just an object that appears in you, and it doesn't really matter to you where those objects come from or how they got there, because you understand that the objects in the creation aren't real in the first place, then you can just move on and try to see how the self and the objects are essentially non-different. And thus, when that's seen, then there you go. You have the vision of non-duality. But, as I've said numerous times, Vedanta meets people where they are. Vedanta wants to address any particular doubts that you have. And some people look around and they go, well, this world wasn't created by me, so there's got to be something else that created it. And I'm looking around, I'm seeing that there's a lot of order, there's a lot of laws, there's a predictable structure that underlies this world, and I'm thinking that there must be something outside of myself, something intelligent that thought of and then designed and created this world. So if you don't have that doubt, then no problem. Don't worry so much about what I'm going to say here. If you do have that doubt, then this is for you. What is the Creator? If we have a creation, what created it? Well, earlier in the text we said that creation was possible because of the power that apparently exists in you called Maya. So, Maya is the creator. That is your creator right there, Maya. Now, if you can follow what I said previously, that everything in the creation is just matter, unconscious, inert matter, and that its cause must also be unconscious, inert matter, because only something unconscious and inert, composed of matter, could make something else inert that's composed of matter. So if you can see that the world around you is just matter, matter that is manifest and able to be experienced, then you can see that its cause, which is Maya, also has to be matter, even though you can't experience it directly. Now, in that way, you can, in the same way that you can see that the individual and the world are non-different as matter, you could also see that the creation of manifest matter and Maya are also non-separate and non-different as matter. It's not as if there's Maya and then over here is the creation. They are non-separate. In fact, the text says as much when it talks about how Maya creates the subtle elements, and then from the subtle elements makes the gross elements, and then the world. So they're all non-separate and connected as matter. Or you can say that everything is Maya if you want. You can look at it from either way. So if that makes sense to you right then and there, then you can see that the individual and the creation are non-different as matter. Okay, so we just have matter. And then that creation and individual is non-separate and non-different from Maya as matter. Okay, we can talk about it like that. To further illustrate, we can ask the question, okay, if I see creation and I think or I infer the possibility of a creator, what is this creator? Is this creator different from the creation? Is it separate from the creation? Well, we already said that the cause of creation is Maya. Maya is composed of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva being knowledge or intelligence, Rajas being power, energy, the power to transform, and Tamas is the physical substance or matter. Now that might seem a little bit contradictory. I'm saying that Maya is matter, and it almost sounds like I'm saying Tamas specifically is matter and the other parts of Maya are not matter, but that's just a manner of speaking. Okay, Maya is matter, its effects are matter. We're just saying that specifically that power of Tamas makes the physical manifestation of the elements into matter that you can see, taste, touch, and smell and hear. Okay, that's what Tamas does. Okay, it takes that and makes the physical manifestation possible. But it's all just matter in one form or the other. All right. So if Maya is those things, knowledge, power, and substance, and it's also the creator, does that mean that the creator is separate from the creation? We kind of get this idea sometimes that there is a creator of the world and it is off somewhere else in another realm, in heaven, for instance, and then separate from that creator and is the creation that it makes. So we've got the creation doing its thing over here, the creator's out over here. Now, is that what Vedanta is saying here with this whole concept of Maya? No. The concept here of the creator is a little bit different. Since Maya is actually the intelligence that creates, it's actually the power that creates, it's actually the substance of the creation itself, the creator, Maya, is totally non-separate from the creation. It is the knowledge that thinks up the creation, but it's also the substance of the creation itself, and also the power that transforms that substance into the creation. So we have this concept of the creator and the creation, but it's not anything separate. Maya is the creator, and Maya is the intelligence that makes the creation, the power that shapes it, and the substance of the creation itself. A common example would be, well, here, how about this? Let's go back a step. We have the idea of a creator and a creation separately. Okay, you can have someone who is a potter, okay, and you can have what they create. You've got a separate potter. He has the knowledge of pottery, he has the skill of pottery, and he has the power to shape the clay. And then we have a substance, clay, which is separate. So we have this being, this potter, who has knowledge and power, and then there is a substance separate from him that he shapes. And this is often the conception of a creator. Okay, we've got this intelligent being with power that shapes something outside of itself to make a creation. Okay, in this case, we have a potter and we have a pot. That is not the case with Vedanta, because what we're saying is that the creator, being the intelligence and the power, is also the substance. So in our idea here of creation, the potter and the clay are non-separate. The more appropriate analogy or metaphor is the one of the spider, and this is often used in Vedanta to illustrate this point. If you say that a spider is a creator of the web, is that spider separate from the web? Is the intelligence and power that shapes the web separate from the web? No, it's not. The spider has the intelligence and skill to make the web. It has the power or energy to spin and put the web together, but does it take some substance outside of itself to make the web? No, it doesn't. From its own very self, from its own body, it forms the web. Okay, so the spider unlike our potter, is the intelligent cause of the creation, and it is also the power and intelligence that shapes it. So this is our idea here of the creation in Vedanta. We don't have a creator separate from the creation. The creation is the creator. The creator thinks up, forms the creation out of its very self. Okay, so Maya is the intelligence, it's the power, and it's the substance. So in that regard, we've seen that the individual person and the world around, the creation, are non-separate. We're also seeing here what? We're seeing that the creator is also non-separate from its creation. So the creator and what it creates are non-separate. They are the exact same thing. You can think of it as matter. As I said before, the creator, Maya, is matter. Its creation is also matter. Maya is the creator, and it creates out of its very self. So its creation is essentially non-different and non-separate from itself. So if you look at it that way, then we can reconcile the differences between the individual person, the world or creation that it finds itself in, and also the creator. They're all non-different as Maya, if you will. They're all non-different as matter. Part of that, the matter can be gross or physical, or it can be unmanifest or subtle, but it's still matter. So the creator, the creation, and the individual are all non-different as Maya, as Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, as matter. So if you want to look at it that way, you can see how all of these things are non-different and non-separate from one another. So at that point, you are left with two different things, seemingly. Okay, there's just you, consciousness, ever-present, unchanging consciousness, and matter, objects. Essentially, we're back at the same, conclusion that we came to before, which is self and not self, consciousness and objects that appear in consciousness. So we haven't exactly fixed this whole pesky problem of duality. Right? We've seen how the elements of duality, meaning the person, the creation, and the creator, are actually all non-different. So we can't say that there's any division there. That's a good thing. Okay, we've been able to get rid of that division, but we still have this whole consciousness and objects. Again, I said before, if you don't really have any kind of questions about, if you can say to yourself, well, these objects I can see are plainly not real, so the question of how they're created is also not real and is essentially irrelevant, then you can kind of just skip ahead past the whole issue of the creator. Okay? You can just say, well, there's me, consciousness, and objects. Objects are all non-different as matter. Now tell me how objects can be non-different from me, the self, and help me to see this vision of non-duality. You can kind of skip past the whole creator thing. That might kind of sound like heresy, sort of, if you're looking at this from the traditional standpoint. But, we're just concerned here with the nature of reality. We're not trying to prove the reality of a creator. From the standpoint of the apparent world, yeah, there's a creator. It's Maya. And you can personify that if you want as a creator. And you can even, as an individual person, be thankful to that creator for everything that you have in the apparent world. That's completely fine. But we don't want to get sidetracked here. Sometimes people get sidetracked with personifying the creator as some kind of deity. and also being sidetracked by wondering what the nature of that creator is, etc. Thinking of the creator as a deity, totally fine. But I just want to make the point here that if you don't particularly have that doubt about the creator, then you can kind of skip over that. You don't have to get hung up on that. You don't have to spend a bunch of time on it. So, what do we do here with this split between consciousness, you, the self, and objects? Now, one analysis, which I might have done already in this series, it's been going on for quite a while now, so I apologize if I repeat myself, but even me at this point, I'm kind of forgetting what I've previously said. But one way to look at it is to analyze what objects are. You can just basically look at it and go, all right, all objects are matter, no matter what. You can look at some object, you can look at a wooden table, for instance, and you can see that that wood is actually not wood. It's really just matter. That's all that is really there. So you can break basically anything down in the creation to just matter. A chair, it's not really a chair, it's just matter. Water is not really water, it's just matter. Air is not really air, it's just matter. Your husband, your wife, your dog, your sandwich that's sitting on your plate, the plate that the sandwich is sitting on, trees, rocks, plants, they're not really those things. If you look at it from the perspective of science, you just see that it's just matter. So when we say that there's objects are just matter. All right. So we have, instead of looking at it as consciousness and objects, we can say consciousness and matter. Now, if matter is real, that means that matter is an independently existent reality. Okay, it doesn't depend on anything else for its existence, doesn't borrow existence from anything, won't need anything to exist. But is that true? Well, it isn't, right? Why is it not true? Because matter is not self-evident. Okay, you can't say that matter exists unless you have what? You, consciousness. Can I say that matter or objects exist if there's no consciousness? I can't. Even the experience of recognizing something, by seeing it, hearing it, tasting it, touching it, or smelling it, is not possible without consciousness. So we can see that matter or objects do not exist dependently. Therefore, on that basis alone, they're ruled out as being real. Furthermore, can you have objects or matter without existence? We've talked about how you are consciousness and existence. That's what your nature is. You are literally consciousness and existence. So we said we can't have matter without consciousness. Okay, that rules out the fact that matter can be some kind of reality or a independently existent reality. But can you have matter without existence? No, you cannot. How can matter exist without existence itself? No, it doesn't. So on both of those counts, we can't say that matter is some kind of separate, independently existent reality. Okay, so it has to depend on something else. Now, what would that be? The only other factor left is you, consciousness and existence itself. What matter actually is, what objects actually are, is nothing but you. It's borrowing, matter is borrowing its existence from you. Objects borrow its existence from you. They have no actual reality, it's just an appearance. So you can say, wait, how can that be? How can we say that the self is not an object, and that now you're turning around and saying that all of the objects are the self? You're saying I, the self, am not an object, but all of these objects are me? Now how can that be? Well, let's go back again to our famous examples of the ring, of clay or of water. We can see in the case of water that ice is water, but water is not ice. We can see that steam is water, but water is not steam. Why is that? Because water is hydrogen and oxygen molecules. Now, ice can be nothing other than those hydrogen and oxygen molecules. But is hydrogen and oxygen molecules ice? No, it is not. Steam can be nothing but hydrogen and oxygen molecules. But are hydrogen and oxygen molecules, do they literally turn into some kind of substance called steam? No, they do not. It's the same with clay. Clay is always clay. It's just dirt, whatever dirt happens to be made out of. So if I have clay, that clay can certainly be a pot or something else, right? But I got it backwards there. The pot can definitely be clay, right? Because what's there other than clay? If you have a pot, if you have a vase made out of clay, if you have a plate or a bowl made out of clay, that form, the pot, the bowl, the plate, is nothing but clay. But clay itself never actually becomes something called a bowl or cup or a plate. The fundamental nature of clay does not transform. I don't have one substance called clay that becomes the substance called pot, called bowl, called plate. It's the same thing here that we're talking about with the self and objects, with satya and mithya. We can say that a clay pot is clay in the same way that we can say all objects are you, the self, consciousness, existence. We can say that. But in the same way that we can never say that clay is a pot, because clay never transforms into a substance called pot, its fundamental nature as clay does not become some other nature called pot. The clay itself, regardless of what form it appears to take, always remains clay. In the same way of that, the self, no matter what appearance may appear in it, never actually becomes any of the objects. We've talked about how the creation is just apparent. There's only the appearance of the objects. The objects themselves have no reality, and they never actually change the fundamental nature of the self. A clay pot really has no reality, does it? There's a form there, there's a shape, and we call that shape a pot. But if you look at the shape itself, do you find anything there other than clay? Do you find clay with like a little bit of substance called shape? If you have 8 ounces of clay that you turn into a pot, do you have 8 ounces of clay plus like a couple milligrams of shape? No. The only thing that's there is clay. This is how the self is not any of the objects, but all of the objects are always the self. Okay, you are never an object, but the objects are always you. A clay pot is never the pot. It's never the shape that we call a pot. It never transforms. It never gives up its nature as clay and becomes a form called pot. However, the pot is always clay and never anything else. Because of the appearance of form and name, we mistake the clay to be something other than it is, when it is always clay, has always been clay, and will always be clay. So there's just you, consciousness, and then there is name and form, objects, matter, however you want to label it, not self. There is you and that not self. However, if you look at it, the not self, in the same way that a pot borrows its substance, borrows its existence from the clay and is nothing other than clay. The name and the form of all of the objects borrow their existence from you, existence, consciousness itself. Even though there's the appearance of objects, there is never anything other than you, existence, consciousness. All of those names and forms, the way that the names and forms of pot, bowl, plate are nothing other than clay, the names and forms of all the objects in the world are nothing other than you, existence, and consciousness. And again, if you can see that, if you can understand that, that is the vision of non-duality right there. You know, we have to talk about objects first. Okay? There is the appearance and the experience of objects, so we have to investigate them to see that they are not real, that we cannot be these unreal objects. But then after that, if we're left with the duality of self and not self, of self and objects, then we don't have non-duality. We have to then investigate these objects and see if they are actually essentially non-different from you, the self, which they are. Okay? If you look into a clay pot, the name and form, which has no real reality, is non-separate from and non-different from clay. The clay is never actually the pot, because you can get rid of that form called pot and the clay is still there. The clay can become a bowl and it's still clay. You can get rid of that bowl, the clay is still there. You can turn that clay then into something else, a plate. The clay, the name and form has changed, but the clay itself has not changed. You get rid of the plate, you still have what? Clay. In the same way, there can be any number of names and forms that appear in you, any number of objects. And yet, no matter what objects appear, they are still essentially and fundamentally you, existence, consciousness. You never stop existing. You never stop being consciousness. You are those things no matter what objects appear in you. And when you actually take a look into what the objects actually are, they are just you, existence, and consciousness. Like I said, if you can see that, then that is the vision of non-duality. If you can see that there's just you and objects, and that actually objects are nothing other than you, even though you are never an object, similar to the way that all pots are just clay, but clay is never a pot. If you can see that, then that is the vision of non-duality. That doesn't finish the text though here. The text wants to go on and explain things in a little bit different way. It's going to continue talking about the creator and also the individual. You know, in the text previously, we've seen how the individual and the world are non-different as matter. As I said, if you can see that the world, the individual, and the creator are also non-different as matter, or non-different as Maya, if you'd like to look at it that way, you can kind of skip ahead to the inquiry we just did, which is there essentially a difference between matter or objects and the self? And if you go there and you understand that, then basically you've got it. You've understood what the text is trying to show you. However, if not, then you can continue on with this inquiry where it's going to take another look at how to see the non-difference between the creation, which includes the world and the individual, and the creator. And from that point of view is going to investigate to see if there's any difference there and actually prove the non-difference between the creation and the creator. So this is going to be the analysis of the creator, also called Ishvara, and the individual person, which is called Jiva. I know I said I was going to talk about Ishvara more specifically in the last video. I said I was going to talk about it in this video, but we just kind of took it in a little bit different direction. We'll take up the topic of Ishvara in the next video and also talk about Jiva, the individual. And we are getting close to the end of this text, perhaps just another couple of videos now. until we finish. And hopefully I'll have those done relatively soon. I'm actually in the process right now of packing things up and getting ready to make a pretty big move from Arkansas out to the West Coast to Eugene, Oregon. And I'm just going to try to get this series wrapped up. I know people have been following it now for like the last 6 months, and I really appreciate your patience, and I hope that these videos have been helpful. If like I said, if you've understood up until this point, you can see what was said in this video, then you've got a pretty good grasp on what the text is saying. For more detail, we're going to go ahead and finish out the rest of the text and look at this whole reconciliation of self to not self in a little bit greater depth by taking a look at the individual and the creator. So come back next time for the next video and we'll talk about that some more. Purnamidaf, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Moodamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukhin Karane, Samprapte Sannihite